scripture is from 2 Corinthians 8, and it's verses 2 through 9. This is the word of the Lord. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. And they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. So we urge Titus, just as he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part. But since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. I am not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So I've just shared a little bit about Brooke, but I'm going to read her bio to you right now. Brooke Ruffin is a graduate magna cum laude from the University of Florida and has a background in advocacy and performance. She serves as the vice president of Street Grace and has been a member of the team since 2018, assisting in the expansions from 1 to 4 markets. Transaction, interception, development, and design. As a survivor herself of CSA and CSAM, she is dedicated to removing the stigma and educating people on how to protect themselves and their families from exploitation. Please join me in welcoming Brooke.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And me and Jesus have been huddled up since I heard 4:30 yesterday. But y'all just forgive me for the lack of eye contact that I may have. So thank you, Roxy, and everyone again for having me today. I am, in fact, not one Bob Rogers, but I have had the privilege of working with him for nearly every day of the last 7 years. He's heartbroken not only because he has a fever and is being forced to slow down, which, if you know him, is one of his least favorite things in the world to do, but because of how much he was looking forward to kind of being back home with you here at North Avenue. For those that don't know, Street Grace was founded in 2008 by a small group of churches, including North Avenue. And before we even had an office, we held meetings here, right here. And Pastor Scott approached then Mayor Shirley Franklin, and she gave the faith community 2 issues: the failing sewer system here in Atlanta, Georgia, and child sex trafficking. And this congregation chose one of the most horrendous plagues on our society to lean in on, and we could not be more grateful. And thinking about Paul's words, talk about in the midst of severe trials. I cannot think of a trial greater than people exploiting our children in this way. To this day, with the work being present across the U.S. and Street Grace having offices now in 4 different states, North Avenue remains a home for us. We share your name all across the country when we share how we were created. And it's wonderful to be here with you again. I used to live in Midtown and attended North Avenue. I was a member of the choir, and I'm actually still part of your Facebook group. And I've just never left it, never had the heart to leave the Facebook group. But you've been here for all of the different versions of Street Grace. And I am so grateful for that, because it has shown so much faith and so much dedication to God's vision for this work. God has opened many doors and broken down many walls for this work. We often say that opportunity follows impact, and so we just keep our heads down doing the work and go where God takes the work. And we didn't seek out any of those expansion opportunities. For Tennessee, there was an organization that called us up one day, and they were having financial difficulties, leadership difficulties. And so we went and prayed on it. We had our board pray over it. And then Street Grace Tennessee was birthed. In Texas, a group of churches called us and said, how do we get the work here? And we said, we'll come together and we'll be there. And so now we're in Texas, housed in one of our faith partners there. And in Arizona, we have our Transaction Intercept program, which I'll share a bit about today. And a gentleman there called us and said, hey, I'm calling buyers manually. I heard about your technology. Is there any way you would come to Arizona? So we haven't sought out any of the expansion that has happened. God has just opened those doors for us, and with heads down doing the work, we've been blessed to go where he has called us. Although it was not the plan for me to be here today, I am so honored to kind of have this full circle moment with you all this morning. As Roxy mentioned, I am a survivor of CSAM, and CSAM, child sexual abuse material. It's what we're changing child pornography to. So because there is no pornography involving children, there is only abuse. So that's kind of an important language shift that we've recently made, and an opportunity just to educate those that you are around. Paul's words carry a message that not only speaks to our hearts, but also calls us to action in how we live, give, and serve others. Jesus becoming poor so Christians could be rich through his poverty is an expression of God's absolute love for generosity, and that it's not meant to be easy. This subject that we're talking about today is not easy. So again, I thank you for your bravery and dedication to your generosity, that you would step into the uncomfortable to allow me up here to speak on what is such a beautiful Sunday morning on such a hard subject matter. We get so much joy out of generosity. And we hear later on that if our hearts are true, it will be multiplied. And this can be seen in the generosity North Avenue has shown Street Grace and the anti-sex trafficking movement, that what we give will multiply. Doors have opened again that we could not have even prayed for as an organization, and I'd love to share how North Avenue's generosity has been multiplied and is impacting people, like you said, all over the world, beyond Atlanta, beyond this street corner, where back in 2008, it was the highest instance of sex trafficking in the Atlanta area. Since then, it has moved predominantly online, and therefore our efforts have had to shift and ebb and flow, and North Avenue has been by our side through every ebb and flow. Our work, our mission is to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children, or CSEC you'll often hear in the space. Our work is streamlined through 4 pillars. Prevention, where we are training businesses, congregations, and communities on how to recognize, report, and respond to sexual exploitation. Keeping kids safe in the digital age, where we talk to parents about how to broach this difficult subject matter with the youth in their lives. We are asking that this becomes table conversation, and that's a really difficult thing to do. Nobody wants to ruin their child's innocence, but unfortunately, they hear about this at school and they're online, and so we have to be that first person that talks about this with them, or their youth pastor has to be the first person that talks about this with them, so that when they inevitably come into contact with a case of sextortion over an app, or somebody's passing around a video at the lunch table, that they have already heard about this from a safe space and they know exactly who to come to. Which leads me to our Youth Leadership Academy, where we're building up the next generation of advocates and giving youth the tools they need to stand up against normalized demand-contributing behaviors. We are a demand-centric organization. We understand that this is a very lucrative and successful business, and so we look at the supply and the demand, and if there were no buyers of the sexual abuse of children, then the traffickers would move on to the next thing to sell, whether it be car parts, drugs, what have you. We were once speaking with a trafficker who had previously been a drug trafficker and asked, why did you switch? You probably never would have been caught. And he said, I can sell a dime bag once a night. I can sell a 13-year-old 11 times a night. So our youth are serving as a renewable resource for this very lucrative industry. These demand contributing behaviors, such as anything you see in a music video, can come into contact with our children on a daily basis via their mobile devices. And so us asking them to stand up against this requires a lot of leadership skills that they have not developed yet. So this Youth Leadership Academy is developed off of the mindset that a confident child is a protected child. If they know what their value is, where their worth can be determined, they can stand up to unhealthy relationship standards that they may be entering in their middle school years. They can stand up to a pornographic video being shared at the lunch table and people laughing at it. They have those leadership skills to step out of the fold, which is what we're asking them to do. Through our protection pillar, we are operating a 24-hour hotline and delivering essential care coordination services for confirmed victimized persons received through that hotline. We've recently been able to expand that to Tennessee. And these stories are vast, but one recently, a teen mother had been kicked out of her placement home because she had birthed her child, and her first call was to her street grace care coordinator. And we did not lose contact until we had her in a new home that she could be in with her baby. She's paying a bit of rent to build up that credit, learning how to save. So that's just one example of how truly intimate the relationship between our youth and our care coordinators are. And they're one of my greatest prides of Street Grace. And our policy pillar, where legislation is developed that not only harshens the punishments for traffickers and buyers, but also aids survivors' successful reentry into society after a life of exploitation. There are a lot of things that can hold survivors back. Whether they were charged with pornography, if they were charged with battery because of a self-defense situation, they can't get an apartment with felonies on their record. So going back and expunging those records. And this legislation, it's not enough to draft it and get it passed. That's a huge victory, of course. But survivors aren't going to know that it exists, and lawyers aren't going to know how to utilize each bill to help survivors. So that birthed the Street Grace Justice Project, which is just another opportunity to share how God has been opening doors that we weren't even looking for here at this work. And through that program, we train pro bono attorneys and connect them with survivors in need so that those records are being vacated and expunged. So one of our survivor leaders on our Survivor Advisory Council is a mother of 3 young children and was denied apartment after apartment because of a pornography charge, and managers coming to her saying, I'm not going to rent to a prostitute. She had been out of the life for 6 years. But because of that charge, she was not able to obtain stable housing. So her record, I'm pleased to report, has now been expunged, and she is in new housing. And our 4th pillar is pursuit. I mentioned that we're demand-centric. That means that we're buyer-focused. We are currently utilizing AI to disrupt online transactions for those seeking to exploit our children. This technology platform is being developed in partnership with Microsoft's Hack for Good program and BBDO advertising, and aids law enforcement by removing the costly, cumbersome, and time-consuming process of sting operations. And you'll hear about sting operations, a couple of times a year here in the Atlanta area, and mainly around those months of awareness, because that's what their budget allows. So we're trying to remove both the time cost and the financial cost for our law enforcement so that they can more effectively go after these buyers. Since our launch in April, this past April, we have located 10,078 buyers, and have disrupted 13,107 transactions. Thank you. And just to further go into y'all's global reach, I know that when you support Street Grace, you're thinking of the Atlanta Street Grace that you support. But we have developers in the country of Georgia that are working on this platform. We have over 100 volunteers through Microsoft's Hack for Good program that are all over the world. I have meetings at very strange hours to accommodate all of these volunteers all over the world that want to get involved, because a lot of people in tech don't know our God. And we're even having the opportunity to pray with all of these wonderful Microsoft volunteers. And it's to the point where now they're emailing me prayer requests. And so it's just been a very unexpected, beautiful door that God has opened through this program, and to kind of to take our faith-based work into the tech world. Over 211,379 text exchanges have been had through this platform since April. And this is with a launch with friends. We're doing a much more public launch in January, but this is with law enforcement agencies and precincts, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, people that we are friendly with that can go on and help us find those glitches and help us improve it. We've been working with law enforcement for over 2 years to develop a tool that they could use. The original goal of Transaction Intercept was to prove to people that this issue existed. North Avenue knew it because it was right on your street corner. Churches in, north of the perimeter would say, oh, well, not in our neighborhood, but we're happy to get involved. And so we would set up an ad in their neighborhood and then be in their space while we received the calls from all of the buyers that were looking to purchase in their zip code. So it was a way to show them where the buyers are. You need disposable income to hide these purchases from your family. So it was a wonderful way to raise awareness. But then we had all of these numbers of these buyers. And so we went to our law enforcement partners and said, okay, well, do y'all want this? And all they could do is compare it to their sex offender registry or people on parole. And it was kind of a not a cohesive process, which is how AI came into play. How can we automate this and have this be a tool at your disposal? So they can log in, see the conversations that our in-house constructed hybrid bot is having with buyers, manually take over the conversation, set a location, and make an arrest. We are gathering intel from the buyers in these bot conversations for deterrence operations as well. And you would be amazed, they freely send photos and details, locations to meet, and all of it is stored in a permanent file with that buyer. So unintentionally, we are building the largest buyer database here in the US and maybe globally. So that is another blessing that we did not foresee, is the research that will come to aid future prevention efforts as well. Every conversation that this platform has with a buyer is one not had with a child. And so that is a very sobering statement, because the ads that we post, of course, they're decoy ads. You can say they aren't real. They're not looking to exploit an actual person. They don't know that we're not a 14-year-old girl. They don't know that we're not an 11-year-old boy. So it's very important to remember, even in the most simplest terms, we're wasting their time and scaring them. They get a deterrence message after the conversation has concluded that says your number has been registered and is available to law enforcement. These are the ramifications of your actions, how many years in prison, how many fines. So it's a wonderful scare tactic. And then 24 hours later, they get resources for healing. And so they get connected to sex addiction resources, counseling resources. They pick their state and can find resources there. We're seeing a very high click-through rate on those resources, which is amazing, because nobody wakes up on a Tuesday wanting to hurt a child. Something has broken them to the point where they think that this is the type of sexual relationship that they should have. So it's been wonderful to see operations send this resource for healing guide, and people actually take an initiative on that on the buyer side. I could spend over an hour talking about just this initiative and the way God has blessed this work and multiplied an idea of simply proving to people that the problem existed to a concrete solution for law enforcement that is scalable to cover our entire country and beyond. We do have an operation launching in Canada, so I'm very excited about that. And those that are driving this illegal industry, the buyers. It's not lost on me how difficult this subject is, so I'd like to bring us back to in the midst of severe trials, those words that we heard. I can't think of a trial more severe and more difficult to stomach than our children being exploited in this way. But there's great progress being made, and the numbers I shared with you are just the beginning of it, so I'd love to speak with any of you just about the progress that we see on a daily basis here at Street Grace and the people that God brings to our door. Our address in Norcross, our suite number is 180, and the amount of people that I've seen come into our doors and do a complete 180 is just amazing. And the amount of survivors that are involved in this work and that are leading this work is truly wonderful. And if we are to lead like Jesus, what better opportunity to use one of his greatest love languages and his joy of generosity to get us through to a light where we do live in a world where children are free from exploitation. My hope today is that this progress is what brings you joy and pride in your church today, because we live in a world that often teaches us to hold ever so tightly to what we have and to cling to our possessions in a way that is so unhealthy, and to cling to our resources and even our time, fearing that if we give too much, we will be left with too little. But Paul's words later on challenge this mindset. He assures us that when we give generously, we not only meet the needs of others, but we also experience the joy and blessings of seeing our gifts multiplied in ways we may not expect. Our generosity should be an act of joy and love. Granted, I know those in the room 15 years ago could not find joy in the specifics of the work that I shared with you today, but they certainly found joy in the hope that they were making possible. And none of the people in that room could have even prayed for the amount of impact that is being made today. So it's a wonderful example that God is the ultimate giver. He gave us life. He gave us his son. And he continues to provide for our needs each day. When we give joyously, we're reflecting God's own nature. And all fathers enjoy when their children take part in their passions, right? Whether it be a day on the golf course, a fishing trip, a football game, and in our case, acts of generosity and sacrificially giving, whether no matter what you have to give, your time. Giving is a deeply personal act, and each of us is called to give in different ways. I came to Street Grace as a volunteer, zero skill set for the nonprofit world. I was just coming off a contract at Walt Disney World in Voyage of the Little Mermaid. So I did not even know how to use a copier. And so I just showed up every day and said, okay, well, this is my life experience. I have done public speaking about it, and I ended up being there more than my day job. So thankfully, Bob added me to the team, but I am a true testament of even if you don't know what you have to give, just start showing up, just start learning, and God will make that so clear to you. We have something to give in this congregation that is so unique because you have lived out the testament of what that hope and what that sacrificial giving will do. We were talking about transaction intercept and AI way before it was well known, and I remember the faces in the room kind of looking at us like, okay, we'll pray over this. But just to be able to come back to you that have been here since the very beginning and give you these numbers brings my heart so much joy and so much hope for the fight against the sexual exploitation of our children. The work and impact being made by Street Grace today is a testament of what generosity can do and how God is going to multiply those efforts. So let's be inspired today by Paul's words and commit to sowing those seeds of generosity in all areas of our lives, trusting that they will be multiplied. And above all, let us give cheerfully, even when facing the most severe trials, and knowing that every gift we offer, no matter how big or small, brings us closer to God's heart. Thank you for having me again today and for letting me kind of come back home this Sunday and celebrate with you all and just experience some of the joy of the generosity that y'all have given and been steadfast, dedicated people to this fight for over 15 years now. So thank you.